At 11:23 a.m. on September 17, 1944, a Sherman tank sat half-hidden behind a stone wall outside the French village of Aral. Its engine idled at 1,000 RPM. Oil pressure read 45 psi. A fine mist of exhaust drifted from the rear vents and froze in the morning air. Private First Class Eddie Kowalski crouched inside the turret, hands slick with sweat and cordite residue. The 75mm M3 gun pointed toward the tree line, 400 yards ahead, where a German Panzer IVs had just appeared. The enemy turret was already turning. Inside the Sherman, the gunner was dead. The commander was bleeding from a shoulder wound. Kowalski was a loader, not a gunner. He'd never fired the 75 in combat, never aimed it, never been taught to. But in 10 seconds, he'd have to try. The Panzer fired first. The shell hit a tree 15 yards short and detonated. Splinters slammed into the Sherman's glasses, ringing off the armor like hail on steel. Inside, the crew flinched as shrapnel pinged off the turret walls. The smell of burnt paint filled the compartment. Kowalski's commander, Lieutenant Carson, pressed a field dressing to his wound. His face was white with shock. He pointed weakly toward the gun. "Shoot!" Kowalski slid into the gunner's seat. His hands trembled on the elevation wheel. Through the periscope, he could see the Panzer's barrel reloading, 20 seconds before it fired again. Doctrine said, aim for the lower hull, hit the tracks, immobilize it. But he couldn't see the lower hull. Trees and undergrowth blocked the view. He could only see the turret. At 400 yards, that was suicide. The front of a Panzer's turret was 110 millimeters thick, too strong for the Sherman's 75mm shell to penetrate head-on, but the Sherman's sight couldn't depress lower than that. He was blind to the target's weak points. Consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to our channel. We upload new World War II stories daily. The Panzer's gun elevated, smoke curled from its muzzle brake. Kowalski's heart hammered. He spun the traverse handwheel left, then back right. The gun wouldn't settle. His boot hit something metal on the turret floor. He looked down. A hand mirror, cracked down the center, maybe 5 inches across. It belonged to Corporal Hayes, the dead gunner. He used it to shave, to check his teeth, to flash signals through the hatch sometimes. Nothing tactical, nothing important. Kowalski picked it up anyway. Through the periscope, he could only see sky and turret armor. But if he held the mirror above it, angled just right, he saw something else. The ground, the Panzer's lower hull, the driver's viewport, a thin rectangle of weak steel. He adjusted his angle by feel. The reflection bent the view downward, revealing what the optics couldn't. The Panzer's gun barked. A white flash, a concussion that slammed into the Sherman's nose. The 75mm armor-piercing shell punched through the front plate and out the engine. Deck without detonating. A clean pass, pure luck. Kowalski pressed the trigger. The 75 roared. The recoil cylinders hissed. Smoke filled the turret like fog. The whole tank lurched backward a full foot. Through the haze, the Panzer's hatch blew open. Black smoke poured out. It didn't move again. 1 shot, 1 kill. From a cracked mirror and pure instinct. But he didn't have time to think. 2 more Panzers appeared on the ridge, 300 yards out, both turrets swinging toward the Sherman. The loader had become the gunner. The mirror was all he had. 3 days earlier, the Battle of Arao had begun, one small corner of a larger campaign. General George S. Patton's Third Army had just crossed the Moselle River into eastern France. They were advancing too fast, too thin. Supplies lagged, fuel ran low, ammunition was rationed. But Patton didn't care about logistics. He cared about momentum. The Germans cared about stopping him. The 5th Panzer Army, commanded by Hasso von Manteuffel, had assembled near Arras, over 200 tanks. Pantherfisses, Panzercheers, and a handful of Tigers. Their orders were clear. Destroy the American spearhead, cut off the 4th Armoured Division, and drive Patton's army back across the Moselle. It was machine against machine. And the math was cruel. A Panther weighed 45 tons. A Sherman weighed 33. The Panther's frontal armor was 80 mm sloped at 55 degrees. The Sherman's was 51 mm nearly flat. A Panther could destroy a Sherman at 2,000 yards. A Sherman had to close to under 500 yards to even have a chance. That imbalance defined every engagement. In Normandy, American tankers had learned the hard way. For every Panther destroyed, 5 Shermans burned. German crews called the Sherman a Tommy Cooker. It lit fast and burned hot. The Americans had their own nickname, the Ronson. Lights first time, every time. Eddie Kowalski knew that name. Every loader did. By the time the 4th Armoured crossed the Moselle, they'd already lost 47 Shermans. Kowalski's tank, call sign Bad News, had survived 6 engagements, mostly by luck. They'd hit Panthers from the side or from behind, never from the front, never at 400 yards. Until now. The problem wasn't just firepower, it was visibility. The Sherman's periscope worked perfectly at long range, 600 to 2,000 yards, but at short range, the angles failed. The gun sights sat too high, the barrels sat too low. Below 400 yards, you couldn't see what you were shooting at. They called it the dead zone. If you were close enough to a Panther to see its treads, you were too close to survive. The only safe move was to back up, get distance, call artillery, or die. Kowalski didn't have that option. 2 more Panzers had him locked in. He lifted the cracked mirror again. The reflection caught the ridgeline, the grass, the base of the lead tank's turret. There, the lower glasses, the weak point. He adjusted the angle 1 degree, held, his breath, fired. The shell hit square. The front of the Panzer tore open. Fire rolled out like liquid light. The 2nd Panzer tried to reverse, its tracks spinning on soft dirt. Kowalski tilted the mirror higher, leading the reflection by half an inch. He fired again. The round struck the rear engine deck. The Panzer shuddered and stopped. Crewmen bailed, running for the tree line. 4 minutes, 3 kills. A cracked mirror taped to a periscope. By noon, word spread through the battalion. A loader, not a gunner, had destroyed 3 German tanks at close range. The feat sounded impossible. At 400 yards, doctrine said Shermans shouldn't even engage. But Bad News had lived, and the Germans had burned. Lieutenant Carson radioed headquarters. 3 enemy tanks destroyed, all confirmed. The response came back after a long pause. Say again. By 2 p.m., every tank commander in the 37th Tank Battalion wanted to know what happened at Arras, how a loader with no training had killed 3 Panzers in 4 minutes, in the dead zone, with a piece of broken glass. What they didn't know yet was how close the rest of them had come to dying for the same reason. By dawn the next morning, the story had already mutated. Some said the loader used a piece of armor glass. Others said a field mirror from a medic's kit. Someone claimed it was part of a German signal lamp. No one believed it was just a shaving mirror cracked down the middle. But the wrecks were real, 3 Panzers still smoking in the fog outside Arras, and that meant whatever Kowalski did worked. Lieutenant Colonel Crichton Abrams, commander of the 37th Tank Battalion, arrived at the scene before lunch. He climbed onto Bad News, looked into the turret, and saw the mirror taped beside the gunner's periscope. 5 inches wide, split cleanly in 2. He turned it over in his hands, expression unreadable. He told Kowalski, "Show me." Kowalski set the mirror back in place and angled it downward. The periscope itself still looked level with the horizon, but the reflection in the mirror showed the ground. The lower slope, the enemy's hull, the kill zone hidden from normal view. Abrams watched as Kowalski adjusted the tilt a few degrees. The sight picture shifted from sky to earth like a trapdoor opening. He understood instantly. It wasn't magic, it was geometry. The periscope's vertical offset had blinded Sherman crews to anything below 400 yards. The mirror changed that by shifting the angle of incidence. The eye line dropped roughly 8 inches, revealing the field that should have been visible all along. Simple. Brilliant. Fragile. When Abrams returned to command post, he gave a single order. Every Sherman gets a mirror. By sunset, 47 tanks in 4th Armoured Division were scavenging every reflective surface in Aarau. Tankers knocked on doors, offered cigarettes, chocolate, even morphine rations for anything made of glass, bathroom mirrors, vanity compacts, car side mirrors. Within hours, the whole village shimmered with light, fragments of glass wrapped in tape, bolted or wired to periscopes. The mirror trick was crude, but it gave them eyes where none existed. Now they could fight inside the dead zone, 200 to 400 yards, where the Germans still believed the Americans were blind. The first test came at dusk. A Panther appeared on a road bend 450 yards out, flanked by 2 Panzer IVs. Abrams held his column still. Let them come. The Germans advanced, expecting the usual American withdrawal. A few smoke shells, then retreat to range. Instead, 17 Shermans sat silent, turrets already aimed low through taped-on mirrors. 500 yards, 400, 300. Abrams gave the signal. The field erupted. 17 cannons fired almost as one. The first volley hit low. Armor plates, driver's hatches, fuel tanks, Panthers burned where they stood. In the after-action report, Abrams wrote, "The mirrors turned doctrine on its head. For the first time, we could see the targets that used to kill us." He didn't mention Kowalski by name. He didn't need to. Every man in the division already knew. But success carried a cost. The mirrors were fragile. Recoil shock from the 75 Smith's gun shattered them after just a few shots. Vibration cracked the edges. Gunsmoke clouded the surface within minutes. And there was something else. Something deadly. Sunlight. When the mirrors caught the midday sun, they flashed. Tiny glints danced across the horizon. And German spotters, scanning for signs of movement, saw them. At 10:15 a.m. on September 18th, Private Ray Hollis from C Company raised his mirror just as a Panther on the opposite ridge fired. The shell struck 6 inches above the periscope, ripped through the turret roof, and killed him instantly. The flash had given him away. Within hours, Abrams issued new orders. Mirrors could only be raised at the moment of engagement. No sunlight, no reflection, no second chances. But the rules slowed them down. And speed was life. By September 19th, the mirror problem had become a study in trade-offs. Mounted mirrors gave stability, but no flexibility. Fixed angles worked only for one range. Handheld mirrors offered precision, but exposed the loader's hand above the hatch, a perfect target for German marksmen. Kowalski, still manning Bad News, kept his original cracked mirror taped to the periscope, 2 halves joined by adhesive, reflection slightly warped, but functional. He could adjust it faster than anyone, and in combat, fractions of a second mattered more than accuracy itself. The division learned by trial and fire. At Soro 900, Abrams ordered a deliberate ambush near the orchard roads west of Aarau. 16 Shermans lined up hull down behind a ridge. They waited. Fog drifted across the field like smoke from an invisible battle. The Germans appeared out of it, 11 tanks, moving, in staggered formation, confident from yesterday's air support. Range, 800 yards and closing. Abrams waited. 700. 600. 500. "Hold," he said. At 400 yards, the mirrors came up. The loaders angled them by instinct, adjusting until the hulls appeared in the reflections. The world inverted, tanks aiming through reflections of reflections, angles measured in breaths. When the order came, fire, the ridge lit up like sunrise. The Germans didn't even return fire. 9 enemy tanks destroyed in 2 minutes. The 4th Armoured Crews began calling it the Mirror Line. But the victory was incomplete. When engineers inspected the recovered mirrors afterward, they found that nearly 70% were cracked or warped. Some shattered from recoil, others from the concussive force of near misses. One loader from Baker Company lost 3 fingers when his taped mirror broke mid-shot, slicing into his hand. Still, they kept using them. Because for the first time since Normandy, the Shermans could fight toe-to-toe. Reports poured in. Visibility restored below 400 yards. High kill ratios at short range. Enemy not adjusting to new tactics. But the Germans were adjusting. By the afternoon of the 20th, they'd learned to look for flashes of light above the American tanks, tiny, predictable, lethal tells. They began firing not at the hull, but at the turret roof, right where the mirrors glinted. Within a single day, 4 Shermans were lost this way. Abrams called another meeting. "Either we hide the mirrors," he said, "or we stop using them." No one wanted to stop. The mirrors were the only thing standing between them and blind death at close range. The men of 4th Armoured voted with tape and glass. They kept fighting. Kowalski spent that night testing materials. He borrowed a steel signal mirror from a downed aircraft crew, polished it, and mounted it with wire. It didn't crack, but the reflection was dull, grainy, useless in low light. Next, he tried acrylic, cut from a shop window. Clear at first, but after 2 engagements, the gun smoke left a film of residue that blurred everything. Glass remained the best, but also the shortest lived. By dawn, his mirror was held together by luck and adhesive. The reflection ghosted with every shot, like light passing through a ripple of water. He didn't care. It worked. And the next morning, when a Panther appeared at 350 yards, Kowalski's cracked reflection still found its mark. The shot tore through the German tank's lower glacis and out the rear, turning armor into shrapnel. Every kill bought them another few hours to survive. Every mirror that broke meant another man would have to improvise. It wasn't doctrine anymore. It was desperation. And somewhere between the cracks and the reflections, between the science and the instinct, the loader from Bad News became something larger than lucky. He'd become the reason. 4th Armoured kept moving east. By September 20th, the innovation that saved them was starting to kill them. The Germans had learned. Panzer commanders began scanning for glints of light. A single flash above an American turret was all it took to mark a target. They stopped shooting at hulls and started firing high, directly at the Sherman's periscopes. At 10:12 a.m., the 2nd Platoon of B Company rolled through a wheat field south of Aarau. Visibility 300 yards. Wind 3 knots east. The first shell came in low and missed. The second hit dead on, just above the gunner's sight. The explosion peeled the turret roof open like paper. The loader holding the mirror never even saw it coming. By 14, 3 Shermans had been hit the same way. The mirror had become both weapon and weakness. Abrams convened another meeting at the forward command tent. Maps covered the table, contour lines, smoke positions, tank icons marked in grease pencil. Every commander from the 37th Battalion stood silent as Abrams laid out the problem. The Germans are watching for reflections. We either hide them, or they'll keep killing us. No one spoke. A young sergeant finally said what everyone thought. If we stop using mirrors, we go back to fighting blind. Abrams didn't argue. He looked at Kowalski, the man whose trick had changed everything. What do you think, Private? Kowalski looked down at his cracked mirror, the tape yellowed, edges black with soot. We don't need to stop, he said quietly. We just need to stop shining. The idea was simple, and in war, simple mattered most. That night, the tankers worked in the dark. They painted mirrors with flat black coating, leaving only a narrow reflective stripe in the center, enough to catch the target's hull, but too small to flash light to the enemy. They called it the ghost strip. Others went further. Some fixed their mirrors inside the turret, angled downward through slits cut in the periscope mounts. The loader could see the reflection, but from the outside, the mirror was invisible. 5 tanks tested the modification by dawn. The result was crude but effective, limited range, maybe 300-450 yards, but no flash, no giveaway. The ghost mirrors worked. The Germans stopped seeing the glint. For 48 hours, casualties dropped to 0. But as always in war, the enemy adapted faster than paperwork. By September 20th, the Germans had changed tactics again. They stopped waiting for close fights altogether. Where the Panthers once pushed into 400 yards, now they held back, 700, sometimes 800 yards. They fired from long range, where the Sherman Sevath Vimy gun couldn't touch them. They'd learned to stay out of the dead zone, flipping the geometry back in their favor. Abrams read the latest intelligence report and swore under his breath. The mirror technique had forced the enemy to evolve, and in doing so, it had shortened its own lifespan. At a strategy meeting that afternoon, he told his commanders, "We bought time, not victory." But sometimes, time was all you needed. On the morning of September 23rd, the Germans launched one last push near the town of Aricourt, 8 miles east of Arras. It wasn't a massive assault, just 25 tanks and a few hundred infantry, a probing action to slow Patton's advance. But it hit 4th Armoured head-on. Fog rolled across the fields like a moving wall. Visibility dropped to 200 yards, then 150. It was perfect for the Shermans. Terrible for everyone else. Kowalski's tank, Bad News, sat in the middle of the line, hull down behind a low rise. He had 3 shells loaded and 2 more ready. His cracked mirror was still taped in place. Through the reflection, he could see shadows moving, German armor advancing in pairs. Panzer IVs, maybe a Panther behind them. He angled the mirror down, steady hands ignoring the tremor that always came before firing. The lead tank appeared in the reflection, a dark outline moving through the fog. Range, 320 yards. Perfect! He fired. The shell hit dead center. The explosion flashed white through the mist. 1 down. He swung left, adjusted angle, saw another tank flanking at 280 yards. He fired again. Hit low, sparks on the glacis. The tank stopped moving. Smoke filled the Sherman's interior, choking thick. His loader coughed, but stayed on the gun. Then came the sound. Deep, guttural, metal grinding on mud. A Panther. 400 yards and closing. The mirror fogged from heat and breath. Kowalski wiped it with his sleeve, adjusted the tilt, searching for the reflection. He found it, barely visible, distorted by smoke. But it was enough. He fired. The shell hit the Panther's driver's hatch, glanced off, and disappeared. A near miss. The Panther returned fire. The shell struck 10 yards short, showering dirt across Bad News's hull. Too close. Kowalski exhaled, recalibrated, and aimed again through the cracked glass. The reflection split the Panther's shape in 2. Double image, overlapping. He aimed between them. He fired. The Panther exploded so violently the concussion rocked Bad News backward. The turret interior went dark from soot. When the smoke cleared, there was only the burning wreckage of 3 tanks. 3 Panzers. 4 minutes. The same impossible math as before. By the end of that week, the Battle of Aricourt was over. The Germans withdrew north under constant air attack. 4th Armoured lost 19 Shermans in total, fewer than half the predicted number. For once, the Americans had won a tank fight not with numbers, but with ingenuity. Abrams's final report to 3rd Army headquarters included one unusual line item. Mirror-assisted short-range fire, improvised, highly effective within 400 yards, recommend further study. The recommendation never went anywhere. By October, the Army was already designing new optics for the upcoming M4A38 and M26 Pershing, periscopes with adjustable angles, better lenses, and built-in depression compensation. The mirror became obsolete before it ever became official. But for the men who used it, the memory stayed. A field fix that shouldn't have worked, but did. A crack in the rules that saved lives in the mud. That night, after the shooting stopped, Kowalski climbed out of Bad News for the first time in 12 hours. He sat on the turret roof and looked at the mirror. It was blackened, cracked twice over, useless now. He peeled it off the periscope, turned it toward the burning ridge, and saw his own reflection staring back, eyes hollow, face streaked with soot. The mirror had shown him the enemy's weakness. Now it showed him his own. He wrapped it in a scrap of map paper and tucked it into his jacket. A souvenir of desperation. A reminder that sometimes the smallest piece of glass could change the shape of a war. The fighting at Aricourt ended in mud, fog, and silence. For 3 days afterward, the air still smelled like burnt steel and gasoline. The Sherman crews sat in their tanks, engines cold, tracks half buried in the churned soil. 4th Armoured had done the impossible, held the line against superior armour. But when the quartermasters arrived, they didn't ask how. They only counted hulls. The mirror trick, the field fix that let men aim where no optics could, wasn't written into any formal report. Command filed it under field expedients, the same bureaucratic graveyard that swallowed hundreds of wartime improvisations. Lieutenant Carson wrote a short after-action note on September 24, 1944. Loader PFC Edward Kowalski devised a mirror-assisted gunnery method for short-range engagements, resulted in 3 enemy tanks destroyed on 17 Seche reproduced successfully in later actions. It was one paragraph in a 15-page document, buried among ammunition expenditure tables and maintenance summaries. The war was moving too fast for reflection. Patton's Third Army was already pushing toward Metz. No one had time to care about a cracked mirror. But the soldiers remembered. By the end of the year, nearly every Sherman in the division had some form of improvised mirror, fixed, handheld, or even welded in place. Each was different. Some were cut from French dressing tables, others from aircraft canopy shards. No two the same, but all serving one purpose: to break the dead zone. It became a superstition. Before each battle, loaders checked their mirrors like priests checking relics. A clean reflection meant survival. A crack meant bad luck. On December 16, 1944, when the Battle of the Bulge began, many of those same Shermans rolled into the Ardennes, still carrying their taped, soot-blackened glass. The snow covered everything. Visibility dropped again. But the mirrors still worked. The trick that started with desperation in Arras kept saving lives through Bastogne, through Luxembourg, through the long white march to Germany. Kowalski's tank, Bad News, survived them all. By war's end, its hull bore 47 impact scars, dents, ricochets and penetrations that never detonated. The mirror, now cracked into 3 pieces, was still taped to the site. After the surrender, the 4th Armoured Division returned home quietly. No parades, no interviews. Kowalski mustered out in November 1945 and went back to Pittsburgh. He got a job at a machine shop. Married his high school sweetheart, never mentioned the mirror again, but the report didn't vanish entirely. In March 1945, Captain Robert Hayes, an ordnance officer at 3rd Army Headquarters, was tasked with reviewing after-action documents for notable innovations. He read Carson's report on page 417 of a stack that reached his chest. He paused on the line about the mirror-assisted gunnery method. He underlined it twice. Then he attached a recommendation. Consider development of adjustable optical equipment to replicate this effect under controlled manufacture. He sent it to the U.S. Ordnance Department in Washington. Their response came back 1 month later. Interesting, but impractical. Close-range tank engagements are declining in frequency. Future doctrine emphasizes long-range fire and air support. The reply arrived 3 weeks before Germany surrendered, and that was the end of it. The mirror technique never entered the manuals, never appeared in training, never got a patent or a citation. But the logic behind it didn't die. In 1946, the M26 Pershing entered service, heavier, better armed with a 90mm gun and fitted with a new periscope that could depress beyond previous limits. The design note for that periscope included an obscure line: improved vertical sight range to prevent dead zone below 400 yards, per field reports from ETO. No one remembered which field report it meant, but the engineers had unknowingly built Kowalski's solution into doctrine. By the Korean War, new tanks like the M46 Patton came standard, with variable angle optics. No one used mirrors anymore, but they didn't need to. The problem had been solved in steel and glass instead of tape and desperation. The loader's fix had become factory geometry. For decades, the story slept in archives. Until 1973, when a military historian named Dr. James Whitmore began researching field innovations from the Second World War. He wasn't looking for weapons or generals. He was looking for mechanics. He wanted to find the stories that never made it into textbooks, the one-off miracles that turned the tide of local battles. While searching through declassified Third Army records, he found Carson's after-action report. He read it 3 times. A loader, a mirror, 3 kills in 4 minutes. He tracked down surviving veterans of the 4th Armored Division. Only 12 were still alive. 8 agreed to interviews. Kowalski was one of them. By then he was 51, with calloused hands and streaks of grey in his hair. He worked nights at the same machine shop he'd joined after the war. He didn't talk much. When Whitmore asked him why the mirror never became standard, he just smiled. "Because it was stupid," he said. "A shaving mirror. Who's going to write that in a manual?" He paused, then added, "It worked because we were desperate. The Army doesn't like admitting desperation." Whitmore published his findings in a small military history journal in 1976. The article ran 6 pages, with 2 devoted to the mirror. He called it Innovation Under Fire, the Loader's Trick at Aral. It circulated quietly among historians, tank enthusiasts, and veterans groups. But it didn't go viral. Not yet. That would come decades later. In 2008, a military blogger researching forgotten WUK tactics stumbled on Carson's original report, now digitized in the National Archives. He uploaded it with photos of Sherman interiors and optical diagrams showing why the periscope couldn't depress below 400 yards. The post went viral in military circles. Forums exploded with debate. Was it real? Could a mirror actually redirect a sight picture accurately enough to hit targets at combat range? Engineers built simulations. Some even recreated the technique in restored Shermans at military museums. The results matched the reports. It wasn't luck. It was optics and timing. The loader had been right all along. That same year, the US Army Ordnance Museum restored a surviving M4A1 and mounted a cracked bathroom mirror on the periscope in tribute. The plaque beneath it read, "Improvised optical aid used by US forces near Arras, France, September 1944. Credited with destroying 3 enemy tanks in 4 minutes." No name attached, no photograph, just the story. But that was enough. By 2010, the last of the mirror men were gone. The veterans who'd taped shards of glass to their tanks had aged into silence, their stories scattered across footnotes and forums, but their innovation had already crossed into legend. At the Patton Museum of Cavalry and Armour in Fort Knox, a visitor could stand beside a restored Sherman and see it, a 5-inch mirror, cracked, soot-stained, taped to a periscope. No heroics, no medals, just a symbol of refusal, the refusal to die blind. The caption read, "Improvised optical adjustment, 4th Armored Division, used during the Moselle Advance, 1944. No mention of the man who'd thought of it first, no Kowalski, just the act, and maybe that was right. Because innovation in war is never about one man. It's about survival. The moment instinct outruns instruction. Modern tankers train differently now. Computers guide every shot. Stabilizers cancel recoil vibrations in milliseconds. Laser rangefinders calculate ballistic drop at 10 updates per second. But even with all that, the lessons from Arras linger in every design. Engineers still study the geometry of visibility, sightlines, depression angles, the way terrain hides danger. Modern tanks like the M1 Abrams use independent commanders' viewers and thermal optics to eliminate the dead zone that haunted the Shermans. But every time the specifications mention the importance of downward field compensation, they're echoing one forgotten loader and his mirror. In one of the Army's post-war technical manuals, a single sentence stands out. Field modifications have demonstrated the need for improved near-range optical depression. Future instruments should account for low-angle target visibility. No credit, just quiet acknowledgement. That's how soldiers' inventions survive, not as names, but as numbers on blueprints. In 2012, filmmaker Sarah Chen produced a documentary called Reflections of War. She retraced the Battle of Arras, interviewing historians, visiting the ridges where 4th Armored fought, and reading aloud from Carson's original after-action report. She found Kowalski's son in Pittsburgh. He was 62 years old, retired from steelwork, and had never heard the full story. When Chen told him that his father's cracked mirror had helped shape the design of post-war optics, he cried. Then he told her the mirror was gone, thrown away when the family cleaned the house after his father's death in 1994. It had sat for half a century in a shoebox in the basement, its tape yellowed, its reflection still faintly silvered. He hadn't known what it was. He said, "I wish I'd kept it, but maybe Dad wouldn't have cared." Chen smiled. "He didn't keep it for credit," she said. "He kept it because it worked." Reflections of War aired on the History Channel in 2013. 3 million people watched it. The story spread across classrooms, online articles, and military briefings. The audience didn't fall in love with technology. They fell in love with the idea that a soldier facing impossible odds used a broken mirror to change the outcome of a battle. That's the real hook, not heroism. Ingenuity, the notion that when the manuals fail, the human mind doesn't. In 2015, during a symposium on battlefield innovation at West Point, a young ordnance cadet presented a paper on reactive adaptation in armored warfare. Slide 3 showed a photograph of Kowalski's mirror. Slide 4 showed a line from an Army field test of the M1A2 Abrams optical stabilizer. System eliminates short-range visibility dead zone identified in WW2 armored engagements. The cadet ended with a single sentence. Somewhere, a loader with a cracked mirror solved this problem 70 years before we did. The room went quiet. Then someone clapped. For a moment, it felt like the circle had closed. Kowalski never wrote memoirs. He never gave speeches. His mirror never appeared in an archive or a museum catalogue. But its logic, that a soldier could bend geometry to survive, outlived him. Historians now list the mirror trick alongside other forgotten battlefield hacks. The welded track-link armor that saved tanks from Panzerfausts, the fuel line rerouting that kept Shermans from burning, and the homemade rangefinder made from binoculars and string. Tiny things. Each one made by men who didn't have time to wait for official solutions. Each one proof that war runs not just on courage, but on curiosity. Eddie Kowalski died in 1994, aged 72, of a heart attack while working at the machine shop. His obituary didn't mention the war. It said only, he liked fixing things that didn't work right. That was true. That was enough. Today, at tank museums in Saumur, Bovington, and Fort Benning, restorers sometimes place a small mirror near the Sherman periscope when displaying the interior to visitors. Most don't notice. Some ask what it's for, and the guides tell them a story about a loader, a broken mirror, and 3 German tanks destroyed in 4 minutes. When the lights go down and the documentary fades to black, one line hangs in the air. He wasn't trained for it. He wasn't supposed to survive it, but he looked at what he had and made it enough. Because innovation isn't born in labs or offices. It's born in mud, smoke, and fear. In the seconds when everything fails and something inside says, try anyway.